Well, this is surely what it feels like when doves cry. Welcome to the John Dulong Show. Welcome to episode number 26. 6 months we've been doing this now. Kind of hard to believe. I mean, like, it sort of feels like simultaneously like it's been longer. I've been doing this forever, but also it feels like 6 months is particularly long period of time to have been doing this. I don't know. It's hard to say. Anyhow, welcome to your weekly dose of the Monday morning nonsense. Come on in, take a seat. I'm John Dulong, so happy to have you here with me. And on this, our 6 month anniversary, I'm not doing any sort of retrospective or anything like that. We do have a pretty packed show. And just right off the hop, I said that I wasn't going to talk about wrestling this week because you folks have been so good listening to me blather on as the WrestleMania season was sort of rolling on. But then a couple of pretty big things happened in the wrestling world this week. I'm going to justify this by saying it's more celebrity news than it is wrestling news, and that's what we're going to talk about right off the hop here. So John Cena and his fiance Nikki Bella have split up. It was officially announced on Nikki Bella's Instagram feed, where she noted that they had chosen to go separate ways, and John Cena and his wonderful, I don't know, like, even if you're not a wrestling fan, like, follow John Cena on Instagram. It's pretty great. It's just like complete nonsensical, like, non sequitur type pictures that he posts, and they're all pretty great. But yeah, he just posted a picture of comic book guy from The Simpsons saying "worst day ever," and yeah, like it's. I think it's kind of sad. I think it's also probably a situation where Cena just didn't want to get married. He's been married before and was very hesitant about tying the knot again. I think that it's probably just a situation where that sort of came to a head. So unfortunate, but also unfortunate was the passing of Bruno Sammartino, who if you happen to follow wrestling, you of course know this already. But like, Bruno Sammartino was Hulk Hogan, he was John Cena, he was The Rock, long before wrestling was a global phenomenon like it is now. He set like records for the number of times of selling out Madison Square Garden. He was the longest reigning WWF champion, which traces its lineage to the WWE title of today. Over 2 reigns, he became the longest reigning champion of all time. Of course, it's a feat that'll never be repeated, because nobody's going to hold the title that long ever again for a series of years. And he was like the guy. He was, and he's kind of the modern, he's kind of the blueprint for the modern day sort of babyface. You know, like the way that Vince McMahon kind of runs things now. It's still very much a situation where he wants to have heroes who the fans can relate to, and Bruno was sort of that working class, Italian immigrant style hero. Now, of course, I love professional wrestling, but like, wrestlers can sometimes just be real garbage people. They are still sort of, in a way, carny trash. And you get somebody like Ryan Reeves Ryback, who posted that in his sort of eulogy on social media, posting about how Bruno Sammartino was Ryback's biggest fan, and couldn't believe the treatment. Just basically using this man's passing, this legend's passing, to put himself over, versus somebody like Bruno Mars, Bruno Mars, who took his stage name from Bruno Sammartino, posting on social media that about Bruno being just a wonderful man who cared about people. It's just interesting to me, the dichotomy there. Ryback kind of being garbage. It's really a shame. Like, I really liked Ryback. Like, if you know me, you know my fandom. Like, I was a real big fan of Ryback back in the day. I liked that sort of that bruiser monster in the ring. And just like ever since he got his release from WWE, he's just kind of become more and more of a bit of a douche, which is, it's just a shame. It's just too bad. So anyhow, that's all goes by way of saying, rest in peace to Bruno Sammartino, one of the absolute best to ever lace up the boots. And that's my non-wrestling corner for this week. I promised I wouldn't talk about wrestling. I didn't really. I don't think so. Anyhow, we're only like 6 minutes into the episode. Anyhow, it's not like I went on a 10-minute tirade like I normally would. So, also on the show today, we're going to be talking about Lindsay Suvanarath being sentenced here in Halifax for her part in the failed plot to do a shooting at the Halifax Shopping Center on Valentine's Day a few years back. I got some stories about that, some memories about that particular news piece. Also, we're going to talk about Arsene Wenger stepping down as Arsenal manager at the end of the season. We're also looking at North Korea, James Comey, Michelle Obama, and of course Verne Troyer, Mini-Me, passing away this weekend. And it's really, really quite sad. So after this musical break, we're going to get into the week that was, the week that is. So, like, really, truly monumental news from the football world this week. It's playoff season for hockey, and perhaps as a Canadian, I should be much more interested in that. I'm just sort of waiting for the Leafs to get knocked out, and then maybe I'll start to give a crap about it. The Sens didn't make it. Obviously, they had a pretty shambolic year. So I just don't really have the energy to care about hockey right now. Like, between school and work and this podcast and my other hobbies and stuff like that, it's just like I really gotta budget my time for things like that. So a lot of my energy goes towards football. Of course, it's a World Cup year, and we're at the business end of the season. Liverpool drew this weekend to bottom of the table West Brom, which we shouldn't have thrown away a 2-goal lead, but whatever. We took away a point from that, and every point matters. And I think we need to get a total of 4 points from our last 3 matches in order to guarantee top 4, which is what the goal is, realistically. I mean, Manchester City have of course won the title. They confirmed that with Manchester United losing to West Brom last week. So every game really matters for Liverpool from here on out. So that's where I'm sort of focusing my attention. Of course, we play Roma this week in the Champions League. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about one of the preeminent minds in the sport stepping away from a post that he has held for some 22 years. Of course, I'm speaking of Arsene Wenger stepping down at Arsenal. When Wenger was signed as Arsenal manager, of course, we were all much younger. He was one of I think the first 3, maybe 4 managers to who were not English-born to coach in the top flight. I could be wrong about that, but he was certainly not the first, but certainly was early on in the wave. He wasn't a renowned player. He didn't have a big playing career, and his coaching career had been pretty milquetoast to that point, to say the least. He was brought over from Japan, which, back in those days, I mean, it's not like the Japanese league is a huge deal now, but back in those days, it was completely unheard of for somebody to come over and coach. Certainly, Arsenal wasn't a guaranteed top 6 team back in those days, but they were certainly one of the most one of the most famous and sort of old clubs in the world. And like he completely transformed that team and transformed the footballing landscape. And you can say everything that you want to say about him, about the game sort of passing him by, which I think to a certain extent it kind of did. There's more money in football than I think Arsene Wenger is comfortable with at this point in time. I don't think he necessarily had the backing of his own board in terms of going out there and buying players to be able to compete at the very tippy top levels as would be expected. But Arsene Wenger, needless to say, one of the absolute greatest in the sport, and just made the decision this week to step back at the end of this season. There's a chance that he could go out on a high, winning the Europa League. I don't see it happening personally, but the team is certainly there. They're in the final stages of the competition. They're facing off against Atletico Madrid. I don't see a way that Madrid ends up losing that match to Arsenal, just based on Arsenal's defense right now and Atletico's firing line in terms of their strike force, and as well as their very good goalkeeper in the back, Jan Oblak. What does this sort of mean going forward? Because I mean, Arsenal's kind of been a team in a bit of a decline for the last few seasons. They're certainly not where they used to be. They used to sort of be. They were kind of having the same season over and over again for a number of years. They were finishing second, third, maybe fourth every single year, going into the Champions League, kind of losing in the knockout stages, and then maybe picking up an FA Cup along the way. They were more or less having that same season over and over again until the last couple of recent seasons, where Spurs kind of finally overtook them, where Liverpool was starting to sort of pull up their socks again and begin to challenge for those top four places on a more consistent basis. It's been a shame in a way that they haven't been able to sort of play catch up and keep up with their contemporaries and their rivals. It was always going to be a weird situation for Wenger's step back. Of course, he's been in that job longer than any other manager has been in the Premier League at this moment. I don't think we'll ever see another Wenger, another Sir Alex Ferguson, if you want to use that as a benchmark as well. I don't think we're going to ever see a manager managing at the top levels for that long ever again. Whether or not you want to consider that to be a good thing, I don't know. Personally, I think it's going to be a real hindrance for whoever does end up taking over. There's a number of different names that are sort of being floated around out there. Most interesting to me is seeing a guy like Brendan Rodgers, who's currently the boss at Celtic, but also a former Liverpool manager. I think Brendan Rodgers is a really good manager. I think he was maybe hamstrung by his relative inexperience when he was Liverpool boss, but he did sort of give us as Liverpool fans one of the most exciting seasons that we've seen in a long time, where we almost won the title, just a few years ago. Whether or not he takes over at Arsenal, I think, honestly, if I were him, I would not be taking that job on. Arsenal is going to be in a state of flux for the next several years. I think that it'd be difficult for anyone to. I'll put it this way: I think it'd be difficult for Jurgen Klopp, who I think is one of the best, top three managers in the world right now. I think it'd be difficult for him to come into that team and be able to affect any sort of change that would make the fans satisfied. Because that's sort of the big thing, is that you're going from 22 years of rule under Arsene Wenger, and even though it's maybe not been good lately, it's been 22 years of the way things are done at that club, and anybody who's going to be coming in is going to be trying to